change in perspective. This is where Richard Rohr says the true self lies. He has a lot of other books. Could give a whole presentation just on Richard Rohr. Really could. Cannot recommend him enough, especially those two books. Okay, one more dive into the therapist's couch. So, show of hands. That was a joke. That was a joke. Who has been depressed? That is a joke. That is a joke. It is true. You're exactly right. Let me just say this. I've had not a lot, but I've had a handful of good friends who felt comfortable enough in me to confide in me about their issues. I've had my issues with depression. They were not debilitating, but they were enough to just put me in a rut. I can't tell you how wonderful and helpful I have found this book, not just because Dr. Cariotti is a therapist who has dealt with monks and priests and nuns, a lot of religious people he has dealt with depression, but he comes at it from a completely Catholic perspective. He ultimately believes, first of all, I like the fact that at the beginning of the book he talks about we need to stop looking at depression as a character flaw. It's simply too complicated. There's past, there's trauma, there's nature versus nurture, there's genetics. We have to stop looking at depression as a character flaw. And then he comes in with his one-liner. Abraham Lincoln was one of the most famous depressives in history. Who would accuse him of having character flaws? You know, really. Cariotti, ultimately, he believes what we need is a relationship with the living God. That is his ultimate solution. This is very, very interesting because a fascinating TED Talk I watched about a year ago is by an author called Johann Hari. And he just released this book, I think this is about a year ago. It's called Lost Connections, Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solution. I'll save you the $25 right now. He pinpoints in all of his research and all of his interviews, the source of depression and addiction is a lack of connection with other people. Honest, genuine connection with other people. Here comes Dr. Cariotti saying from a Catholic perspective, the answer is connection, authentic relationship with the living God. So, thank you, Johann, but Byzantine Catholics have known this for over 2,000 years. So, I want to read a couple sections of this because it's really good. John Paul II understood the need for depression when he addressed a congregation of therapists, and I really like I like everything that John Paul says. Who doesn't? But this was very interesting. He told this group of therapists, by its very nature, your work often brings you to the threshold of human mystery. It involves sensitivity to the tangled workings of the human mind and heart, and openness to the ultimate concerns that give meaning to people's lives. These areas are of the utmost importance to the Church, and they call to mind the urgent need for a constructive dialogue between science and religion, for the sake of shedding greater light on the mystery of man and his fullness. John Paul understood really well how deep this can be and how complicated depression can be. But I think John Paul is also saying, look, if we kind of don't tackle our depression, if we kind of don't do something with it, it gets in the way of our spirituality. It's hard to be very spiritual and uplifted and get the full benefits of prayer and all of those things when you're depressed. You just don't always feel like it. So the Catholic approach, and again, throughout the whole book, his answer is you cannot consider a cure to depression apart from a spiritual life that is intended to grow with our relationship with God. So I want to read two more sections that I think we'll find very beneficial from this book. Jesus' sorrows culminate on the cross, where he painfully and mysteriously cries out, my God, why have you abandoned me?" This cry of anguish occurs as he hands himself over to the one who appears to have forsaken him. This brings together in a single event all human sorrow and depression from the fall to the consummation of the world. All the world's sufferings are taken up into the death of Jesus and transformed in the revelation of his infinite and unconditional love for man. Sorrow and anguish, which used to indicate man's separation from God, is now paradoxically made into an expression of God's love for man, and thus an indication of union with God. The cross and the resurrection irrevocably and fundamentally alter sorrow and its meaning. Brought through the fires of the Paschal mystery, neither man nor his mental suffering are the same, because the individual who is united to Christ now finds himself in a previously unforeseeable communion with God. He is made a member of Christ's mystical body. He is brought to share in the Trinitarian life of God. Christ has redeemed depression. Faithful to his promise after the fall, God does not allow sorrow or anguish to have the last word on human life. All suffering is relativized by his love. Suffering is compelled by Christ to become a grammar of love. No suffering or misery is greater than God. Depression need not utterly overwhelm those who are united to him. Instead of indicating separation from God, suffering can become a vehicle by which one is brought into deeper intimacy with him. Whoever thought of depression that way? I mean, it's a total twist of, you know what? In some ways, there's opportunity here. There's room for growth here. From St. John of the Cross till who knows how many mystics and saints we could name that has suffered and battled with depression. And I'm so happy that someone has come here, a therapist, and written such a book to give us this Catholic take on depression. I want to end his book with just one more quote. This one got triple. It got the earmark, it got the square, and then it got the exclamation points. So, like, this is a really good part of the book. In the midst of severe clinical depression, I have never felt anything redeeming about it, spiritually or otherwise. But when I emerge back into life, several things become clear. One is that the darkness did not kill me, which makes all darkness more bearable. And since darkness is an inevitable part of the cycle of spiritual life, this is valuable knowledge. 2, depression has taught me that there is something in me far deeper and stronger and truer than my ego, my emotions, my intellect, or my will. All these faculties have failed me in depression. And if they were all I had, I do not believe I would be here to talk about this experience. Deeper down, there is a soul. That helps explain, for me at least, where the real power of life resides. Take that and meditate on it. There's something more than our mindsets. There's something more than our habits. There's something more than our beliefs. Again, cannot recommend this book enough, and it's for insights like that. It's our problems that get us into that situation, but as he says, there's something more there. There's a soul. God wants us out of our heads. Is this someone's idea of a joke? This is where we get ourselves in the problems. So a little humor. All right, last 5 books. The first 5 books were either written by a layperson, or they help us get out of our way, or they deal with a serious issue like depression. Now, I want to hit these last 5 books are basically, this is strict theology. This is strict spirituality. Here again, in the Divine Comedy, the first 2 parts, Inferno and Purgatory, Dante's guide is Virgil. He's a poet who was born before Christ. He didn't know Christianity. He didn't know who Christ was. He wasn't aware of any of that. So scholars speculate, why is Virgil Dante's guide? Because in the Inferno and in Purgatory, Dante is not ready for the teachings of the church. He's not ready for the Gospels. He's not ready for God. He's not ready for these things. He has to do his deep dive. He has to become more self-aware. And then once he clears up some things, he can make good use, as I keep saying, of spirituality, of theology, of all the things the church has to offer. So I want to talk about 5 books here. These are 3 of them all together, or 3 of them together in one, the Light for Life series. And I'm going to tell you why I can't recommend these highly enough. Father David Petrus, who was one of my professors at seminary, was one of the principal contributors on volumes 1 and 2. When the seminarians apply to seminary, they're asked what priest, it's something like, what priest do you most admire, or what priest would you like to most be like? Well, if I had to answer that question, my answer is Father Petrus. I think he is as genuine as they come. I think he is as authentic as they come. I think he is as spiritual as it come. I only got to take a few classes with him, and I only got to know him a little bit while I was at seminary, but knowing that he played such a large role in this 3-volume series, really, are you kidding me? Someone stole my volume 1. I know who it was. Yeah, I'll deal with him later. Yeah. But incidentally, volumes, he's going to get all my writing and notes in the margins, I hope he knows. Volumes 2 and 3, they are on the table here. They are free. They are compliments of the Office of Religious Education and God With Us publication. If you think these books are going to entice you, please feel free to grab copies and take them with you when you leave. No charge. Volume 1 you can get on the God With Us publication website, and it's only $10. Volume 1, which I can't hold up, I'll just point to it. Volume 1 contains all of the classic and most helpful themes, if you will, of Eastern Catholicism. And they're really laid out and emphasized very well in Volume 1. They keep coming back to them in Volumes 2 and 3. The process of becoming what we believe, theosis. This is the central theme of Eastern Christianity. It's discussed beautifully in Volume 1. We're called to the faith of the church, not our own ideas and feelings. God is not even our best thoughts about him. I hope I've shown with Richard Rohr and with the book on depression, when we focus on ourselves, we can't get ourselves out of that. We need this objective reality to attach ourselves to. This is a tough pill for some people to swallow, but we are called to the faith of the church. Not our whims, not our ideas, not our moods. Look, the church was established. The church has the mysteries, all of this. It's the church that we have to adhere to, not our own whims and what we feel is faith. There's no individualistic faith. It occurs in community. This is another tough one for some people to take, especially an introvert like me, where what I think and what I believe, I think is right. No. It happens in the context of community. Church and community bring us out of ourselves. That theme is really hammered away in Volume 1, but they come back to it again in Part 2 and Part 3. Church and community is what brings us out of ourselves. And for those of us who ruminate on our thoughts too much, the best remedy is to be brought out of ourselves. Volume 1 also has one of the best summaries of salvation history that you're going to find. From Genesis all the way through to the New Testament, everything. The fall, image and likeness, the covenant, the transfiguration, it's all there. And the theme throughout this entire summation of the Bible, it's pages 18 through 57, is God taking the initiative. It's God that keeps taking the initiative every single time. He talks about the Eucharist, the church fathers, and the book ends, he actually ends with talking about the martyrs and the confessors of the faith. These are the people whose sense of God was nurtured, and it became so strong that they could not become public witnesses. Their life could not represent God and their beliefs. So individuals who continually search for the truth, hopefully that leads them to Christ as the truth. Then they can say that they have a deep personal faith, but it's not a private faith. This is where Volume 2 comes in and picks it up. It shows that our faith is no longer private, and it goes through all the daily cycles of prayers, the divine liturgy, and the feast days. A word of caution, that can sometimes get monotonous. Reading about all the services. I remind you back to what Haldis says in his book, that the purpose of the ritualism is to get us out of the moods, to get us out of that mindset, to always have the opportunity to open up this space where we can encounter the divine. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're reading through Volume 2, because that can get a little bit tedious for some people. Finally, I want to mention one more thing here. He talks about living liturgically in this book a lot. And I'll use an anecdote. One night in class, Father Petrus mentioned that he saw a book, and the book was titled something like Sunday, the Most Important Day of the Week. And Father Petrus says, no, I don't agree with that. Our entire life is supposed to be liturgical. It's not just Sunday. It's not just one day of the week. And that anecdote has always stuck with me. And Father Petrus has a beautiful line here, which I'll use to end on this book. The liturgical way of life is not based on the number and kind of services one attends, but on the degree to which the Paschal mystery has become the focus of our inner lives. Our challenge lies in integrating spiritual values into our everyday life, making it relevant, but through union with God. how can we not be given a change of heart and a change in the way that we see things? Volume 3 then goes into, and I'll just go through this one, relatively quickly, but this one then is, we are transformed, now we're out in the world doing our mission. He sums it up beautifully on page 7. To know God as He has revealed Himself, to live in Him through the worshiping community, to serve Him in the working out of our lives. This is our faith. I want to mention one more thing about this book before I go into the last two, because I'm running a little bit late here. What's that? Oh, is it? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, I will end super, super fast. Literally. Okay. I told you that 8 of the 10 books that I presented, the 8 I just presented, anyone can pick up, super approachable, go for it. The last 2, they require a little more digging and a little more heavy lifting. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but Thomas Spidlick, one of the most impressive Eastern Catholics you probably never heard of. He was born in the Czech Republic in 1919. He began his studies during the Nazi occupation, but actually got interrupted several times into forced labor. He eventually finished his studies. He was called to do broadcasts on the Vatican radio during World War II. This guy has life experience. He started teaching at the Eastern and Patristic Theology at the Pontifical Oriental Institute. After the war, he then basically sought to reestablish or focus strictly on Eastern Christianity. In 2003, he was named a cardinal by Pope John Paul II. And in 2005, he was actually selected to give one of the exhortations at the conclave that elected Pope Benedict. So what I was going to say before I wrap it up is, he basically did what was not available, or at least to my knowledge is not available in English. He wanted to come up with a complete handbook for Eastern Christianity, for Eastern Catholicism. These books together are just over 1,000 pages. The bibliographies are 100 pages each. They are footnoted with every church father, scholar, and if I had more time, I was basically going to tell you all the things it covers, everything from liturgy to theosis to the spiritual battle to overcoming the passions. The second volume is specifically just prayer. Because if you look at the church fathers in the East, they talk about prayer more than anything else. So, sorry I'm running a little late. I would have had more time. Let me leave you with 3 closing thoughts here then, as I wrap it up. That is your brain. That is your brain on a theology degree. So, number 1, I needed these books, and I hope you can use these books, because I need people who think better than me. I need people who have a healthier spirituality than me. I can't imagine anyone picks up these books and reads them and is not changed by them. The second thought I want to leave you with is, good theology, I think, can change your life. I can learn every statistic there is about every Pittsburgh Steeler. It ain't going to change my life. For the past 15 years, I've been getting to know my wife better, and that has actually enhanced my life. I think these theology books are like that. And the third closing thought I want to leave you with is, all of these books, I think they have one common thread with all of them. When you talk about the president, a celebrity or something, we always refer to them in the third person. But when you talk about your spouse or your child or your family, you speak to them in the second person. All of these books are geared toward getting us to think of God in the second person, in relationship with a living God. I can't stress this theme enough for Eastern Christianity. We need to think of God and be with him in the second person. Sorry I'm running over. I hope you appreciate these books. Thank you for your attention.